Hey all, Ron here from Military Images Magazine with a new episode of Life on the Civil War Research Trail. I want to respond to a comment from one of our subscribers. Her name is Sarah Brown, and she noted in response to a recent episode, here's her comment. Everyone calls it Pickett's charge, but the entire Confederate line charged. Pickett just happened to have the unfortunate luck to be positioned in that spot. Sarah's comment inspired a question. Why is it called Pickett's charge? And so I thought I would go down the research rabbit hole and try to answer the question, or at least coming up with a working theory to help explain why we call it what we call it. So my first stop was Robert E. Lee's official report, which really goes a long way officially and from a military perspective, from the most popular, the most respected general in the Confederate Army. Now, I'm not going to read the entire report because it encompasses the entire campaign, but I do want to get down to the part where Lee addresses Pickett's charge. And by the way, he only mentions Pickett once in this very long report. In this excerpt, we've got one mention of him and also Longstreet and some others. And to better appreciate how Lee discussed Pickett's charge, he put it in context of the second day's battle leading into the third day. So let me take you into the second day, and then we can go from there. So here's Robert E. Lee. Quote, the preparations for attack were not completed until the afternoon of the second. The enemy held a high and commanding ridge along which he had massed a large amount of artillery, General Ewell occupying the left of our line, General Hill the center, and General Longstreet the right. In front of General Longstreet, the enemy held a position from which, if he could be driven, it was thought that our army could be used to advantage in assailing the more elevated ground beyond, and thus enable us to reach the crest of the ridge. That officer was directed to endeavor to carry this position, while General Ewell attacked directly the high ground on the enemy's right, which had already been partially fortified. General Hill was instructed to threaten the center of the Federal line in order to prevent reinforcements being sent to either wing and to avail himself of any opportunity that might present itself to attack. After a severe struggle, Longstreet succeeded in getting a possession of and holding the desired ground. Ewell also carried some of the strong positions which he assailed, and the result was such as to lead to the belief that he could ultimately be able to dislodge the enemy. The battle ceased at dark. So that's Lee setting us up with the second day's events. So here we go, third day. These partial successes, says Lee, determined me to continue the assault next day. Pickett, with 3 of his brigades, joined Longstreet the following morning, and our batteries were moved forward to the position gained by him the day before. The general plan of attack was unchanged, except that 1 division and 2 brigades of Hill's corps were ordered to support Longstreet. The enemy, in the meantime, had strengthened his line with earthworks. The morning was occupied in necessary preparations, and the battle recommenced in the afternoon of the 3rd and raged with great violence until sunset. This, of course, is Pickett's charge. He does not call it that. Lee continues, our troops succeeded in entering the advanced works of the enemy and getting possession of some of the batteries. This is around what today we know as the copse of trees. But our artillery having nearly expended its ammunition, the attacking columns became exposed to the heavy fire of the numerous batteries near the summit of the ridge, and after a most determined and gallant struggle, were compelled to relinquish their advantage and fall back to their original positions with severe loss. So there's the entire description by Lee in his reports. Now, I'll add one other paragraph, the paragraph following July 3rd, where Lee famously falls on his sword and talks about the troops giving it their all. And it's worthy of mention here because it connects with a couple of other news reports that I want to read to you. Lee says, the conduct of the troops was all that I could desire or expect, and they deserved success so far as it can be deserved by heroic valor and fortitude. More may have been required of them than they were able to perform, but my admiration of their noble qualities and confidence in their ability to cope successfully with the enemy has suffered no abatement from the issue of this protracted and sanguinary conflict. So there Lee has described and put context around the whole thing. Now, that's Lee and the reports. During the weeks after the battle, of course, the newspapers, the press gets involved, and they begin to do their reporting to try to understand and help make sense of the battle for all of the readers. Most of this conversation, in fact, all of it, as far as I could find, according to newspapers.com, is based in the Southern media. This later becomes a topic in the Northern press, but during the weeks after, it's in the Southern media. And much of this is a human reaction to a tragic loss for the Confederacy. And it takes a very binary form during these early weeks. There's basically two questions: who gets the credit and who gets the blame? And then who are the heroes? And out of this, Pickett becomes the hero, and fingers begin to point as Pettigrew, General Pettigrew, who gets the blame. So I want to start with the pumping up in the media of Pickett. Here's the Richmond Enquirer, July 21st, 1863. We're only a couple weeks after the battle, and here's a snippet of one of those reports. It says, quote, "Of the valor and courage of the troops at Gettysburg, I wish that I could speak in detail. I have every reason, however, to believe that Longstreet's men under the war horse," that's Longstreet's nickname, "never fought better. Hood and McLaws on the second day and Pickett on the third fought with more than their accustomed valor and skill, but were not strong enough to break 5 lines of battle formed of living, breathing, fighting men behind the most approved breastworks of modern times. 3 lines of battle were pierced and passed, but the other 2 resisted our heroic efforts, and so let it be admitted." So there you go, a story from the Enquirer of Richmond, who is basically giving Pickett credit for going as far as they were able to go. Now, following on that pro-Pickett account, you have on July 28th, a little more than a week later, coming from the Stanton Spectator in Virginia, you've got this article written or credited to someone identified as TP, the initials TP. And this is titled "The Charge of Pickett's Division." So here we have a mention, Pickett and charge in the same headline, "Charge of Pickett's Division." And here we go. Quote, "A gentleman in whose every word reliance may be placed, and who witnessed the desperate struggle he describes, furnishes the following account. It is due to General Pickett and his division that the country should know and properly appreciate the service rendered by them in the terrible action of the 3rd of July. The day preceding, the division had made a long and toilsome march. At 8 o'clock of the 3rd, they moved forward to the field of battle and were in position very early on the morning of that eventful day. During a considerable portion of the forents, the division was exposed to the burning rays of the July sun and the terrible shelling from the enemy's batteries, thus very much exhausted by the immense heat and seriously crippled by the enemy's fire. About 3 o'clock, they were ordered to charge the heights. An eyewitness testifies that they formed into line of battle as coolly and deliberately as if forming for a dress parade, headed by their gallant officers, the column being led by General Pickett himself. They moved forward to the carnage across a plain some 500 yards in width, subjected to the action of guns smoking like a hurricane of death all over the field. The noble and gallant Pickett, commanding, then pressed up to the ugly ramparts of the enemy. It is believed that a more gallant and heroic charge was never made on this continent. Pickett's division had been in the hardest fight of this bloody war. The division have borne themselves well and nobly, always and everywhere, but the crowning glory of this patriot heroes was achieved in the assault upon the ironclad crest of Gettysburg. The list of casualties tells, in terms of truer eloquence, the bravery and patriotism of that blood-stained and self-honored division than can be figured of rhetoric or poetry. Every brigadier fell, and a long catalog of colonels and other officers. The division went in from 5 to 6,000 strong 3 days after the battle, but 1,500 reported for duty. Well done, noble heroes, officers, and men. Your country will cherish the memory of your deeds and sufferings with a gratitude and affection which time can never obliterate. Major General Pickett has well earned and will no doubt receive the meed of his country's praise. Without meaning to disparage any other officer or division, it is indeed a high honor to have belonged to Pickett's division and to have fought under that gallant commander. So, if you thought the Richmond Enquirer story was praising Pickett, the Stanton Spectator's account goes way over the top, beginning to establish that narrative of the heroism of Pickett's division, of that charge, of their leading role, the heroes, the ones who were most successful in breaking through the Union lines, or as far as they could. Now, the third account goes back to the Richmond Enquirer on the same day as the Stanton Spectator. This is an excerpt of an account, and this time there's some real finger pointing going on here. And here it is. Quote, General Lee did not renew the attack next day, Friday the 3rd, until 10 o'clock, when he opened upon the enemy from all parts of the line with over 140 guns. The enemy responded promptly and vigorously, using a great deal of round shot, his supply of shell, it may be, having been exhausted. So heavy an artillery fire was probably never had before. Our guns were well served, as shown by the ground assault around the Federal batteries, which was covered with dead men and horses. At 2:45, and after the artillery had prepared the way, Pickett's Virginia Division, Longstreet's Corps, which had only arrived the night before, was ordered to assault Cemetery Hill, which was considered the key to the enemy's whole position. He was supported by Heath's division, commanded by Pettigrew, Heath having been wounded in the first day's fight, and Wilcox's brigade of Anderson's division, both belonging to Hill's corps. Pickett's charge, and there you have it, Pickett's charge was made in excellent order and gallant style, and he succeeded in wresting a portion of the hill and the guns in that quarter from the enemy. But the enfilading fires which were brought to bear upon him, and the failure of Pettigrew to get up simultaneously with himself, rendered it necessary for him to retire with great loss. Here is probably to be found the real cause of our unfortunate failure. So there you have the Enquirer pointing directly the finger of blame at Pettigrew, and by doing so, you're elevating Pickett's division even higher in the estimation of the public. And note that the Richmond Enquirer also uses the phrase Pickett's charge, which of course is handed down to us today. So my theory is this. So what we've come to call Pickett's charge is the result of an original Southern narrative that was established in the weeks after the battle, thanks to Robert E. Lee's official report and the Southern press. It is endured to this day. It's Pickett's charge. However, history is not inert. It moves. The Civil War is no exception to the way we talk about it today. In fact, in recent times, historians and other students of the war have come to call Pickett's charge by different names, just a few of them. The Pickett-Pettigrew-Trimble charge, the Pickett-Pettigrew-Trimble assault, and Longstreet's assault. All of these names are accurate, and these newer names that we're beginning to use get away from that original narrative that talks about Pickett's charge and talks about the heroism of Pickett and begins to point blame at other folks who were not part of Pickett's division. So there you have it, my take on Pickett's charge. And again, a thank you to Sarah Brown for her intriguing and interesting comments. We'll see you